I'm Don Holden at the Art Students League of New York. Once again, we're back in the studio where Robert Beverly Hale gave his famous lectures on figure drawing and artistic anatomy. You're now going to see the 10th and final lecture in the series on the head and features.
We've been working on the head, and I thought we might tonight take up the features, which of course are the eyes, the nose, the mouth, ears, possibly even the beard, which of course is related to hair tracks on animals and grows in its own peculiar way. We might start with the glabella, and for those who don't know what that is, it is this a keystone there, a down plane, takes shade, the light comes from above, the glabella. That moves immediately into the nasal bone, about the same length. And that moves into the nasal orifice. The orbit, as you remember, plays around this way. One good thing to think of is that the whole width of the head is 5 eyes, and that there's an eye between eyes. The eye would be about that length, I think, because the nose is about 2 eyes, and there'd have to be an eye between it. And that helps you place things. Probably more like that. That's an old rule, of course. There are 5 eyes across the full block of the head. And the nose about 2 eyes long. From the nose to the chin is about 2 eyes. The mouth is about 2 eyes, average. You know the average, you can see the odd. Well, the orbit, as you know, runs around the horizontal really, and a diagonal around the corner, and drops, comes back. Has a little feel here through the skin. And the eye we think of really as an eyeball. It's like a little ping pong ball that's thrown into this cup, you see. And to a great extent, the drawing of eyes is to be conscious that there is a ball. And all students learn to run lines over forms, you see. You see, just circles, semicircles around the form. That's the way you get eyes. So practice, if you're starting to draw, practice running circles around cylinders, around spheres, around eggs. You might run a spiral around an egg and see what you get. You might possibly get a lock of hair that Botticelli designed, you know. Run a spiral ribbon around a cone and see what you get. Of course, if you could shade the cone out of your head, then you could shade that spiral ribbon out of your head. That's the way they go ahead, you see. Well, that ball is in there. I think this is a touch lower on the average. A ball is in there, the eyeball, and it has in the center of it the colored part, which is really quite big, which we call the iris. And in the center of that is the pupil, through which we look. Every year the commercial charcoal gets grayer, and I suppose it's because they add some sort of a clay adulterant. I wouldn't be surprised. It's all compressed nowadays. The upper lid, perhaps to some people's surprise, normally just clears the iris. It starts about here, and you see, it just clears the iris. That's not the idea at all among beginners and primitives. They always draw eyes like this, sure. It's their idea of an eye. But just take a look at your neighbor. If they're in good health and unaffected by thyroid trouble, you'll see that the upper lid just clears the iris. It would have, of course, two lines on it if you watch very carefully, but it would be a down plane. I suppose we might draw the side view of this thing. We'd come down on the, let's get a center line. There's the supraorbital bump. There's the going black of the glabella, coming forward of the nasal bone. There's the nasal orifice. And the orbit, a little more complex here, but it moves around a good deal like that. And the eyeball is pushing out, you see. And the iris is in there. Anybody ever try to draw a circle on that part of a ball? It's a very peculiar line, you know. You might think occasionally, take a rib cage that is lying down, you know, just looking up at it, and it's a woman, and she has a couple of breasts here. Now the base of the breasts are circles on the egg. You know, they go like that. There's nothing like taking these forms and drawing letters on them in various positions. Factually, if you take the ball here, the curve of the iris goes like that. You can see that in Dürer, who was very observant. Now, do you remember these two bumps up here, the inner supraorbital and the outer supraorbital? Perhaps we ought to feel this line comes down here. Goes back on the zygomatic arch, you remember? And the cheekbone comes, and the point of the cheekbone is a great landmark for us. It's that. I think a landmark because there's a plane break runs up this way. And that's a very definite front and side to the head. And we're always looking for front planes and side planes. You can feel that on yourself. Line that goes up there from the point. You see, it always hits the outline on the 3/4, which is a very hard outline to get or to place anything there. Now, up above the upper lid, in fact, the upper line of the upper lid, there is a form that the artists call the sausage. And when you draw the upper line of the upper lid, you really think of the sausage more than anything else. It's a great big sausage-like business that takes in this outer bump here. It takes that in. It comes down, not quite as low as the eye, and it travels over the upper lid. And it seems to sort of come across about here. And very often there's another little bit of the sausage there. A little higher, I think. So the sausage is an independent form because it's made up out of the outer supraorbital eminence and the orbicularis muscle in there. It can be separated and recognized from the rest of the face. In old men, the sausage has a great tendency to fall over the eye. So in old women, they look like eagles, sort of. That's gravity, you know, that acts on us all our life. The lower lid on a young normal person will just clear the bottom of the iris. It's well to think of the side view of this. The upper lid is running like this, and it has a strong little down plane on it, you see. That's why I was sort of darkening that up. But the lower lid has a very strong up plane. And artists just love to light this here. That's the lower lid. They might even brighten it with a highlight. There are lots of reasons they do all these things. You see, a trained artist knows that nothing pulls the eye of the observer more than contrast. And so if you're starting to draw, be very aware of all your contrasts. You find usually that you put them in the most peculiar places. Actually, to build up your layman's interest more than anything. Depends what you're interested in a layman. As a layman, you see, that's where you put your contrasts. That's why everybody's interested in sex. That's why in the beginning they make black nipples and a black crotch and a black navel and I don't know what other sexual symbols we have. But there's enormous contrast in beginners around those things. But an artist, of course, puts his contrast where his great and major light planes meet to bring out the mass. But here's a case where we get a free contrast just because we have an up plane there and a nice dark iris, you see. The light may be coming from here, which is normal and in front, and we would shade, be quite a lot of shade on the down plane on the sausage there. And the artist would be conscious of the contrast between this light here and that dark there. If you take your cylinder and shade it in that light, which is really this, see, it hits the cylinder like that. If you're trained, you know how to move that into the highlight, away from the highlight to the meeting of the great planes, which is there, and then back to the light again. And so the lid itself is pretty much a section of that. That's why artists put a highlight there. Because they want to bring contrast, because you know the old saying is, the eyes are the windows to the soul, and you get the eyes right, you get the personality right. So I'd move up on that highlight, I'd move up on that highlight, and I move away to it into quite a dark, and then back to reflected. I certainly wouldn't do what the beginner does, which is to cover it all with cast shadow, so that it doesn't look as if you're not playing at all. Although the cast shadow is there on practically every one of you as I look at you. This little plane in here is interesting. It comes from the mass conception of the spool. You see, it's that sort of a plane there. It's convex, latitudinally, you might say, and concave longitudinally. As so many planes have those two directions, you see. Of course, you have to know what latitude and longitude is, or are. Maybe a lot of you don't know, but if you don't, just ask the intellectual next to you. You'll find out. You see, the trouble with teaching in the League is you teach an enormous range of people. And as a teacher, you'll find that there are words like parallel, perpendicular, oblique, diagonal, that a great many of the students don't know. Latitude and longitude, that mixes everybody up, of course. But planes you often think of as convex in the latitudinal way, and concave in the longitudinal way, because there are always two directions to a plane. And they're always taken from mass conception. The eyelashes have troubled artists and sculptors since the world began, because they really haven't any mass. And artists and sculptors like to deal with mass. The artist usually solves it by actually using the cast shadow this time. The cast shadow that the eyelashes would fall. He sort of veils the eyes with it. You see, it doesn't even look right to do this, which is what beginners do. It looks like some peculiar bug under a microscope, you know, something like, or it looks like Hollywood in a funny way. Looks like a paramecium, looks like all sorts of things. It doesn't look really the way eyes look. So they often use the cast shadow of the eyelids, except in certain cases a 3/4 back of the head. They often seem to be a bad mark there. Can't get out. They often put a little line of the eyelash here. You see it. But very often you don't use the eyelashes. And of course, for beginners again, begin to think of the sculptor's problem. He can't mold each eyelash out of clay and stick it on, you see. What does he do? Go downstairs and look. There are about 8 pieces of sculpture in the hallway. Marvelous for beginners, those pieces of sculpture, as far as the head goes. In some of them, every plane of the head is very carefully studied. Underneath here is a vague form called the tear bag. Now, it's not very obvious in young people, except after a night of dissipation, perhaps, sometimes. The line on most people between the lower lid and the tear bag, if they're older, isn't very clear. You can see mine, I must be developed by now. It is misnamed. It is misnamed because the tears are actually generated in this big, thick upper lid. The upper lid has the tear glands in it. That's why it's thicker than the lower lid. Oh, well, I was after this plane here. You see, that plane, which is convex that way, concave that way to the outside, is this plane in here. It is just skin over the bone, you know. Just skin over the bone there. The glabella would be dark because it's a down plane, but the nasal bone would be light because it's an up plane. Of course, again, beginners will throw all the cast shadow they have on the nasal bone, so you can't see the difference between the glabella and the nasal bone on a front view. So look into your cast shadows very carefully if you're starting to draw, and think a lot about them. The eyebrows, of course, the eyebrows follow the orbit, which is natural, because it's supposed to stick out the most here. And what they are really are gutters. They carry the sweat or debris or whatever is here to the outside of the eye, you see. And they run along like this, and be sure to lighten them up in the highlight if they pass through a highlight, because they're very shiny. But they follow the orbit underneath. And as I may have said last time, if you do portrait painting, watch them, because they're influenced by those emotions we talked of. You see, some people are amazed all through their life, in which case the eyebrows rise a bit above the orbit. Others are very reflective. I think if I were a portrait painter, I'd just go up and feel the orbit and figure the whole thing out. I should have brought some red chalk. It looks like something like that here. There is a peculiar little red gland in here. Little red gland there. I can't get any red. Which is called the caruncula. And it secretes a kind of this waxy substance that sometimes you find in your eyes after a hard night out. Right next to it is a curious little, much darker red film called the plica. The plica is interesting because it's the remains of the third eyelid we used to have when we were water animals. Went across that way, as many water animals have. That was discovered by the great German biologist Müller. He found a few muscle fibers in it. See, you have to know your history, or otherwise you don't know where to place your gratitude. So study history for gratitude. Oh, this little more of a downplane in here, I think. Of course, the ball itself is a ball and would be shaded like a ball altogether. Might be a little darker over here. There are interesting proportional ideas here. If you can think of the head as a block. If you drop a line from the inner corner of the eye of each eye, you'll get the width of the nostrils. If you drop a line from the pupil, that's the height line, you see, you get the width of the mouth on each side. In other words, the mouth would be 2 eyes wide. There's an idea to judge mouths against. Of course, the finding of the point of the cheekbone, I find that you take a vertical just a little to the outside of the eye on most people and bring it down to the level of the nose. You get the important point of the cheekbone. This sausage here comes down quite far, and if the light does come from there, over there, the plane seems to break up here more or less, and then out is always a little light in over here, and then the side planes seem to follow the line of the cheekbone there. Well, let's see what else is there. I think those are things artists know about eyes. The iris, pupil, upper lid, the sausage came as a surprise to me when I was taught it as a student, I know. Eyebrows, they're not so difficult. The tear bag, the amorphous form. Let's think about the nose. Some of these details of the nose are hard to get except in a medical book. But the nose has a plate inside, comes right out like this, called the septum. On the side view, it would look like this. And of course, people note the little change in angle there between the septum and the nasal bone. It's a little like the rib cage, you know. You draw a little rib cage from the front, and you get the manubrium and the gladiolus. It's like the angle of the sternum. Now, the septum here opens up a little as it comes down. It's quite wide, really. And running from the face, you might say, or from the bone, to the septum are two ligaments. The upper lateral ligament is the first. They make sort of the roof of the nose. Under that is the lower lateral ligament, which is sometimes called the comma ligament, which you see very clearly in animals because they're not all so fortunate as to have nostrils. That comes down and sticks out beyond the septum. Let's look at it here. You see it sticks out beyond the septum. Like that. And then the nostril, you see, fits in there. Nostril is just cartilage and fat, very movable. This lower lateral, if you watch for it, you can see it on a great many people very clearly. On here they come out, you see, and they touch the two lower laterals. Then the nostrils, which seems to me you can't think of anything but sort of half spheres. They're hooked on to the lower lateral. Well, of course, the light comes from there. The nose has a side plane. This whole plane here, all the way down, is a side plane. Or really down to the nostrils. Beginners, again, should watch the shade there and the light there, because they just love to put a big shadow there. I love to keep saying that if I were a beginner, I'd keep taking a dollar bill out of my pocket to solve all these problems. Because Gilbert Stuart was a great artist. And he's not going to give you a lot of cast shadow over on the side of the nose here just because it's there. He's going to be very subtle about this cast shadow here. He's not going to throw a cast shadow on the side plane of the hair, even though of course it would be there. All kinds of things in that. He's going to make this little upper plane on his coat very bright here, and very bright here, that little narrow place, even though the cast shadow falls on it. Certainly, I would say the greatest of our colonial artists by far. A lot of people will shout Copley, I know, but get a little more panache, you know? A little more panache. God knows he was a drunk. He was a drunk, and you know what he did? He painted this picture of George Washington that you all have in your pockets. And he took it home. He had a hard time painting it because Washington was very deadpan, you know, and he tried to amuse Washington by driving horses past the stable studio door, even driving young girls past. But Washington just kept this absolutely grim look. And finally he said to Washington, let's forget that I'm Stuart the painter and you're the great General Washington. And Washington said, let's not forget. He wouldn't change this deadpan he had. But anyway, Stuart got a pretty good picture. And he took it home and he thumbtacked it up inside a cupboard door, you see. And then whenever he needed a little money for liquor, he'd sell a copy for $100. That's why there's so many copies of this picture. It's called the Athenaeum. The original is in the Athenaeum in Boston. Well, there are simple ways of constructing noses and planes. There's a sort of a business like a house on its side on the bottom, on very handsome people. The nose is beautifully carved on them. I guess that would come in a little more. Then the nostrils, of course, are... there's a nice little plane on the bottom of the nostrils if the head is lifted up at all. That little dark plane there. Again, you'll see that very clearly in Dürer. So our planes go front, side, and of course, front again. And then we have a feeling that this is a brutal downplane, you see. This is a brutal downplane. This is the very fine upplane here. They love to put a highlight right there. This is a little more down, and they seldom continue the highlight. This is an upplane again, and they put a highlight right here. But they probably wouldn't put it on this lower one. In other words, they'd put the highlight here and here. And of course on these nostrils very often, just about where it would be if you studied the shading of spheres a lot. This side plane now. And the little nostril is shaded a lot like a sphere. Well, let's see, that gives us the mouth. That, I think, brings you right into cylindrical concepts. The mouth goes around the teeth, and you know that teeth are cylindrical. That means that we have to study those things a lot, as we already have, I think. So draw your 3 cylinders and put rubber bands around them. Realize that all lines carry over conceived form, but one has to know what the form is and what position and aspect is taken, you see. In other words, a rubber band across here goes that way and around the other side, horizontal. The same rubber band goes this way here, and the same one goes that way there. So, if I lift my head just a little or drop it just a little, a good draftsman is aware of it. You can't see that curve change unless you know it has changed. That's the center line of the mouth. Though it's dangerous to take shape conceptions from writers, they love to say her lip was like a Cupid's bow. They're referring to this break here, of course. It is, but it's a Cupid's bow going around a cylinder, of course. And that means you can draw the Cupid's bow on the front elevation, like that. But if the downed head is tipped this way as a whole, you see, it'll be more pronounced. Here you get the surprise of your light. The Cupid's bow becomes convex that way. And even this line changes a bit. The line here is interesting. You know, artists draw lines where planes meet. This plane meets that plane there, you see. Artists also draw lines where one color meets another color. That's white, and that's dark. You see, some other color. The upper lip fulfills both conditions. In very young people, there may be a break of planes here, but as you get older, this line here is just a line where one color meets another color. I don't feel any plane anymore there. But you draw it anyway, because you draw lines where one color meets another color, you see. I think maybe somebody lend me a piece of paper in the front row. I could bend this, show you those planes very nicely. Oh, thank you so much. It's this movement over here, you see, that you draw the line on. You see, this space in here is bounded by two lines, as we say, really meeting as planes. It's called the philtrum, you know, which comes from the Greek, means love filter. But we can bend the paper so it approximately goes that way. And then we can draw the Cupid's bow on there. And perhaps you can see that on the front view, this line is concave to the top, you see. But as you tip the head up, it begins to look convex. Since we, of course, mask the head as we're studying draftsmanship, we know what way that cylinder is going because it's going the same direction as the head. And we draw the mouth around it. Of course, anatomically, I guess everybody knows. Oh, we ought to put a little something here. Anatomically, the mouth, the upper lip has three lobes, the center lobe, and a lobe on each side. And the lower lip has two lobes. There's a very curious little thing seldom mentioned, I've never even found in the medical books. There's just a little string of white around the top here. It's almost enough to be a little plain. And around the bottom of the lip here. Going on big scale, you often see a sharp little movement there, which is that plane. Bridgman told us about that. He called it the new skin, but I've never run across it in any book. But if you're very observant, you'll see it on a lot of people. Well, the mouth, the ear. The ear, I think, if you just get the anatomy of the ear, this outer rim of cartilage here is called the helix. And then inside here, there's a cartilage that divides as it goes up. That's called the antihelix. Then there's a lobe here called the tragus, and another one here called the antitragus. Those things are all anatomical, and you can find them in medical books. In other words, the helix, the antihelix, the tragus, and the antitragus. Tragus means like the nose of a goat. And I think the Greeks called it that because goats have hairy noses and that sometimes has hairs on it. This big lobe down here, I think everybody knows. It's a sign of wisdom, as you know, among the Chinese. Keep in mind that the ear, it's the 3/4 back that shows it. The ear is what it is. It's an ear trumpet and looks it from the back, you see. Functionally, it's an ear trumpet. Well, let's see the eyes, nose, mouth, ears. Oh, the beard. People sort of feel the beards just great masses of hair all over the face. But they, of course, are not. They follow the hair track rules of animals, and they break up into very specific tracks. So let's draw maybe an old man and examine his beard. I suppose we'd feel the mass of his head. Hey, in a ball, vaguely, you might get a center line. Maybe we box it up a bit, but we take that up later. Oh, he'd have a nose. If he's old, it would seem sort of everything be a little bonier. You know, the skeleton sort of comes through as you get older. The head is up the tiniest bit. There'd be 5 eyes across there and an eye in between. I guess his eyes would be about here. The sausage would be over it. He'd have bushy eyebrows if he's old. His supraorbital bumps would be clear. His frontal eminence would be clear. I think I'd come in a little. I suppose his tear bags would be clear if he's old. Eyebrows bushy. All the wrinkles of his face would be clear. The wrinkles around there, up here. He's old, he's done in. A lot of shade on the side. We catch his ear by squaring up, as we'll see. Might give him a hat. Really, to show the beginners that if you throw a few circles around the head, you get pretty nice hats. But we're interested in this old man's beard. First of all, there's the mustache. And then there's the goatee. Then there's the beard at the center of the chin. And then the beard of the corner of the chin. Now this is the way beards like to grow. And you may notice that barbers have always known this, and at times, as you look back through history, you'll find people have favored some of these and not others. Think of Franz Joseph, think of Napoleon III, and so on. There's the beard of the cheek. There are the sideburns, named after General Burnside of the Civil War. And finally, there's the magnificent beard of the throat, which can grow any distance at all, which comes from the hairs on the throat, you see. We could, I think a little ribbon would be attractive here. We could put numbers on these just to clear it up. 1 for the mustache, 2 for the goatee, 3 for the beard of the center of the chin, 4 for the beard of the corner of the chin, 5 for the beard of the cheek, 6 for the sideburns, and 7 for the magnificent beard of the throat. Well, perhaps we should have a little recess, and we come back, we do the head as a whole. Well, now I think we might take up the head as a whole on that really extraordinary difficult problem of tipping heads in this position, that position, and the other position. That taxes all the qualities of draftsmanship. The solution seems to be, of course, to put the head in a rectangular mass and to carry one in your mind of a certain size. And then you can easily see how the model differs, with the details, of course. Certainly, if you're starting ahead from the side, you'd feel the mass first in your mind. Maybe you feel it unconsciously later. It's the egg and the ball. And you can block that up, you see. People like to say that that ball in the back is 5 eyes by 5 eyes if you block it. Its diameter is 5 eyes. I've found it a beautiful proportional aid, because the 5-eyed line seems to keep reoccurring in drawing, as I pointed out. Well, you can feel that in the back. You can always feel cubes in any rectangular mass. And actually, the whole solution of perspective for the figure is learning to draw cubes in any down position you please, not only in the architect's manner, but in the perspective manner. Because perspective, of course, is drawn from architecture, from the conception of the front, side, and top view, the front elevation, side elevation, and plan. And we have to get a certain instinctive feel of that before we can really draw beautifully. If you take the depth of the head as 6 eyes, you can drop it 7 eyes and get a pretty normal head. And then you find all these things we're talking about on the skull are pretty true. That's the line of the widow's peak, as they call it. It's about 1 eye down. And then you divide that into thirds, and I would say they were each 2 eyes, because this is 7 down there. The top of the head is about here. And the thing about the widow's peak, it's really not the hair we think of, but the plane break, you see. And you get all these things we've been studying. Now, this center line goes through the top of the glabella and the root of the nose. The lips may come out a good deal or not so much, you never know. And the chin may come through or just touch the box. One thing that beginners never get is the almost universal truth that the eyes are in the center of the head. They always draw them up here someplace. I've never figured out why, except maybe they remember the days when they looked up at their mommy and daddy or something like that. I don't know. But just, you see, the top of the head is way up here. And the eyes are about halfway down on the average head. So we could feel the eyes about there. And the eyebrows move around. Now, this is a famous depth line. And here is a depth line. We're moving into blocking. We think of the body in the doctor's anatomical position. And we block each part of the body. And these are the height lines. These are the width lines. These are the depth lines. But we may put the body in some very odd position. This still is the height line of the block, you see. That remains for descriptive purposes. The hard ones for students to get are always the depth lines. Well, they like to say the ear comes in between the 2 lines there. And the mouth is too high for the normal. The mouth is supposed to be 2/3 up there. It'd be about there, I think. The commissure, where the lips meet. The point of the jaw is supposed to be on the same level as that, you see. Then the head comes around, and the mastoid process comes through the box. And the neck comes from a little bump here called the cervical protuberance or something. Beginners do certain things almost invariably. Watch it if you're just starting out. They will cut off the back of the ball. They will bring the neck from way in here someplace. Instead of, if you feel the back of your head, if you're an adult, and I think I have some here, you find you don't go in much. Then they look at the neck and they see that and they think, well, that's not wide enough, so they come through here. That's what beginners do. But to try to kill that, more or less, well, let's try a front head. It's 5 across because we can feel in the back, you see, that ball. We can feel the egg in the front. The egg is narrower than the ball, much narrower. You see, I'm widest back here, very narrow here, in front. 5 eyes, let's see if we get it about the same here. Yeah, that's about it, I think. Still 7 down. Center line is always valuable. Then we just take these take these width lines, you see, on the same level as the depth line. There's your rule of 3, you see. The eyes are in the center, and this is the 5-eyed line, and you see we could, if we put our eyes in, with an eye between eyes, at least the line goes through the outer corner in almost everybody. Our eyes look pretty much straight ahead. You see where beasts of prey, that's a sign of it, and their eyes look ahead like an owl's or a tiger's. But the beasts who are going to be eaten have their eyes on the side, you see, so they can see the other ones coming. Very funny thing, you know, women's eyes look out just a little more than men's. So you have to really look and see whether that line goes straight through and hits these points, or whether perhaps it curves out just a little. It's not necessarily a sexual matter, actually. Well, here are all these things we've been studying, the nasal bone and the nose and everything, the nostrils. You see, we can drop a line from the pupils and get that's the height line, you see. You see what we really do in drawing. Every cube, every rectangular solid has 3 line systems. The height systems, well, let's draw a box, a cube. And then let's look through it and see the other side. You see, you have 4 height lines, 4 width lines, and 4 depth lines. And you use those a great deal in draftsmanship, especially as you get into perspective. Drawing almost in perspective just becomes a matter of taking a ride on a height line, a width line, or a depth line. But that means you have to learn to mass things and draw things within masses, as I'm doing here. Don't get worried because maybe the ears stick out of the mass. That doesn't make any difference. Or maybe on the, as I think I said last time, on the moose, the head might stick out. But go ahead and see if you can more or less learn by heart a head of your own in terms of mass, such as this. It might be valuable to draw the plan, which surprises people, I think, a little. The ball is in the back. this is 7 here, you know, 7 eyes down. And that's 6 across. This must be 6 here. 6 and 5 across. And feel the ball and feel the egg in front. And then see if you can get the contour line here as you hit the supraorbital masses and so on and go back. If you can't think other views of the body when you're drawing, you really lose a great help in drawing, I assure you. As I've said, a good draftsman knows all the horizontal cross sections of the body, the general ones, you know, which he gets from drawing contour lines as a student on the horizontal. Well, now we have a head. We have to throw it in some position, up or down. So what do? We draw a box and we throw that in the same position we want our head to be, you see. After you've drawn a few head boxes, they become almost instinctive. I think I'll throw this up a bit, you see. Now, the thing we want to do is to translate this head into this box. We can get a center line there, and then we can mark off these other lines. Those are the width lines, you see. And they'll help us. And we can mark off the depth line. If we wanted to, we could start off this way. We could vaguely feel the egg and the ball, you see. But you see, the trouble with eggs and balls as mass symbols is that they don't give you any precise direction. It is only the blocks that give you precise direction. We know all about that head. It's looking that way, there's just no doubt. But it's awfully hard to say what that is. I could have drawn that first and then put the box about it if I'd wish. You might practice that. Or I suppose I could draw the egg and ball inside there. I think it'd be about like that. Now, all the information is here. That's the way the architect draws his plans in order to give information to the workman, you see. Those are the blueprints of the head. And, of course, they can be carried from there over to here. The glabella, you see, would be something like this. Now, we come to quite a problem here. The features all have to look the same way as the head. And one of the beginner's favorite tricks is to throw a head this way and push the nose over that way, you know, and put the mouth like this. One ear here and one here, there, one there. But if you block, of course, you never do that anymore. What we want to get is the extreme point of the nose out here. Now, artists are aware that there's a little triangle under the nose, which in this school is called Dickinson's triangle, because Edwin Dickinson talked about it so much, I guess on this very problem. If we can get that, I think we can get the nose. To make this into a very simple pointed nose, we'd get that, and that would be the point of the nose. If we can get that line on that figure there, we can find the point of the nose, you see. I think I could have got a better proportion there on those. Well, this line here is that line there. And if you can think like an artist, you realize it's that line. Awfully funny thing in drawing, you know, a point is a symbol of a line on end if you're on the level of that line and directly in front of it. Well, here I have a depth line, and certainly if I carry it out further, I'll hit the point of the nose on a sort of a blocked up nose. Here I have a depth line, I've stated it, and if I carry it out about as far as I think it ought to go, I get that. Of course, I could do it by mathematics and say, you know, this is 5 eyes here, and it's a touch less than an eye, you see. I could do the same thing here. Then just by pulling a triangle down to the depth line, I can get the nose directed and put in the glabella and come down and at least create a simple nose of some sort into which I could pack the real nose of the model. But at least it would be looking in the right way. The mouth we talked about a bit, but I think the secret is to feel a cylinder or a sort of a cylindrical form. It's really this when you get down to contour lines, a cylindrical form in there, you see, in that box, going the same way as the box. If you just feel your head up here, you'll feel how cylindrical it is. And you realize the lines as such are drawn on it, you see. The center of the face must be about here. And remember those rubber bands, the first line of the eyebrow is straight. But if it's straight from the front view, as indeed it would be here if I put it in on the normal, it's like that rubber band of the mouth. You're going to feel a curve around there, and that'll affect the first line. The next line is going over the mass, you see. The next line is vertical of the orbit, so that's a cinch, because all vertical lines will follow the axis of the cylinder. But again, I feel my way around. You see, this line is that. And we feel our way around. Now I'm going to the other side of the cylinder. Now I'm coming from the other cylinder, from the other side of the cylinder around. You see, our lines run over conceived form, but we have to know what the form is and what position it's in. So if I draw these eyebrows, I can see they're up just a bit. They'd have that feel, you know, and this feel here. The 5-eyed line is a line about one eye back on the depth line. It's in the middle of the box, and then it goes right through to the other side of the box. And we hang the eyes on it. 5 of them. There's an eye between eyes. It'd be about like that. The mouth is on a cylinder. The position of the cylinder, the little one, will be the same as the main position of the big one. So you put a sort of a tin can in here in that position, and run a rubber band around it, you see, and then build up the lips as best you can. It might be that you want to get, if the lips are coming out, you'd want to get that point there. But you get that on the depth line, just a little touch out beyond the center line. So the little gap in the middle wouldn't be quite on the line itself. The chin may either touch seems to be touching here. That means the center of the chin's about there. The widow's peak is interesting because we go back on the depth line. You see, we go back about 2/3 of an eye on the depth line, from the center line, you see. A line parallel to the depth line, really, that means. But it must be there. That's where the plane is breaking there, you see, more than anything else. Now we'll see the importance of the point of the jaw. You get it on this picture, drop the vertical of the mass and to the level of the nose. On this picture, you do the same thing. A little outside the eye, they say. But it won't be on that line because we're running over the cylinder. It'll be a little low, it'll be about there, and the same on the other side. Perhaps you can see its advantage now. You see there is a real plane break here, and over here too. If we can get that line, it's awfully hard to draw this line down here, you know. But we know that it follows the plane break, then hits that point. People vary a lot in here because of wrinkles and old age and everything else. But if you can catch that point, you can often get that very well. At the same time, thinking about the five-eyed line. The ears, oh, I see, that should be changed. The ears are just between these two depth lines, normally. If they're not, you notice it. Well, those are the main principles of the up head. Let's try a down head, which shouldn't be so hard. It's just the same thing. Should we feel the mass first? The egg and the ball. Maybe get a center line. The center line through the edges is run through the top of the glabella and the root of the nose. We're going to throw it up now a bit, architecturally. Quite a wide side plane here. The front is so narrow. Again, we on the center line, we get the rule of 3. Of that. Yeah. Those are the width lines, you see. They're all parallel one to the other in this type of drawing I'm doing, which is architectural. There's your depth line. Now, the nose, you see, we come out on the depth line, and we're looking down on the triangle now. But at least if we come down like that and go down like that, we get the nose in the right position. The little, or the big feel of the cylinder is in there, you see. We have one of these. And it tells us all sorts of things. It tells us, well, we have to draw the eyebrows on that thing, you see. The first line will come up, and then we feel our way around it. And the next one will go down like that. Feel your way over the form, you see. I'm sorry, I have to get closer for details. The same thing will be true here. The line of the eyebrow will be that. It's the same as the orbit. And then we really have to get a line that goes right around the corner and shows on the other side. And then the vertical. And then the next one, you see, I'm going around this cylinder. And you can see on that line not only the back but the front. Look at me automatically use a width line there. In my subconscious, I noticed I did it because I wanted to catch where the line I'm about to draw will end. It'll end on that width, you see. The point of the cheekbone we can catch out here. And that makes it pretty easy to come down on the far side there. Oh, we go back for the widow's peak, you see. We might put in the ear, because if we do, we can examine the hairline, which is that. Can you draw it over on the other side and feel it over there? Good practice. The five-eyed line starts about here and goes across. And we can put the eyes in, just hang them like washing on the line. Eye between eyes. Now, the mouth will, of course, be on a tin can that is going that way, you see. It'll be 1/3 from here to there, about there. It'll have that movement to it. Pupils don't like to do that because they feel they're going to make it look as if he was smiling, or she. These are sexless, these heads. But when the head is down, there is a curve of that sort. Build lips on it if you wish. And you get a sort of a head. What I thought I'd show you is what happens in strange cases. You might have somebody that has a mouth like this, and then what they call a weak chin like that, you know. They do happen, you know. Well, what do? The same old tricks. You say, well, I have to come out on the depth line for that mouth. I have to come out about a half an eye from the mouth level, you see. And so your circle's way down here, and you build your lips on that. And the center of the chin is back on the depth line, in the box. The center of the chin must be about here. And then you'd have to change that, you see. And then that person becomes that. As you get terribly sophisticated, as life goes on, you've drawn so many contour lines down the center profile and in other places that to a great extent you get your center lines by drawing the contour line of the profile, you see. And you place lots of things that way. I know a lot of artists place the eye by feeling the contour line in here. So practice lots of contour lines. Use lots of construction lines, even though they mess up your drawings, and you become very able craftsmen. Well, I'm afraid that this is our last lecture. This is our last lectures, and partings are always sad, and I think they were best expressed, as far as I know, pretty close, by one of our great folk singers, whose name was Leadbelly. His real name was Ledbetter. Ledbetter was born in 1888 in Morningsport, Louisiana. And he grew up, but he was quite a bad boy because he committed murder, assault, and homicide when he was in his early 20s. So they got him and they put him in prison for life. But he went to prison with a 12-string guitar, you know. And though he used to, he was in the chain gang, he used to break rocks all day. At night he would go home to the prison and he'd play the 12-string guitar and make up songs for the other convicts. And a great folklorist, Avery Lomax, heard about this. And he went to the governor of Louisiana and he said, this Ledbetter is really an incredible musician and you've got to give him a pardon. So the governor said he'd give him a pardon. And when Leadbelly heard the pardon was coming, he wrote a song that goes, take this hammer, take it to the captain, tell him I'm going, tell him I'm gone. And if he asks you, maybe was I laughing, tell him I was crying, tell him I'm gone. Thank you.
You've just seen Robert Beverly Hale's 10th and final lecture in his series on figure drawing and artistic anatomy. Thank you for joining us. This is Don Holden at the Art Students League of New York.